So, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the third Sonic movie, directed by Jeff Fowler. Um, I was not a fan of that first Sonic movie, pretty much at all. It's just a lame road trip with James Marsden and Sonic. And even Jim Carrey wasn't all that funny in that movie. I was like, man, these jokes just really aren't hitting. I don't think they really had a grasp of what they really wanted to do with that first one. But the second movie kind of won me over a little bit. I was like, wow, okay, this plot is still kind of messy. It's got some issues, but I like Knuckles. Idris Elba's as Knuckles. I thought was funny. Jim Carrey actually was making me laugh as Eggman in that second movie, and the action was all good, especially at the end. Sonic and Tails had a good dynamic, I think, too. And I was like, okay, this is better, right? Like, I think this overall is fine. So with this third movie, we got Shadow the Hedgehog in this, played by Keanu Reeves, and I was like, okay, that's interesting, and I at least want to see how it's going to turn out. So this one starts off with Shadow, played by Keanu Reeves, like I said. And he's in some kind of containment thing, like this military group gun has been holding him there for 50 years or something like that. He wakes up finally and destroys his whatever he's this containment thing is that he's in, and just beats up all the soldiers and things like that, and gets loose. So then Sonic and his friends, Tails and Knuckles. Sonic once again played by Ben Schwartz. Knuckles is Idris Elba, and then Tails is Colleen Shaughnessy. I probably messed up that name, but they go there to take care of it and fight Shadow, and they end up getting beat up. I mean, it's pretty bad. Like all three at once, pretty much, just getting knocked around, and he ends up getting away. So they have to figure out, okay, uh, who woke him up, who's behind this, and him getting loose and everything, and what's really going on with Shadow and how to defeat him. Well, ultimately, like I turned out to be like okay with it. Right, this definitely got some problems with the story and the writing, and I'll definitely talk about that. I don't think it fully reaches its potential, which is the thing. But I walked out feeling mostly positive about it. So positives, I think all the performances of the at least the main cast here, like Sonic and Knuckles. You got Jim Carrey as Eggman and Eggman's grandfather. That's in the trailer. That's not a spoiler. Um, I think that they all do great, right? They reprise the roles really well, and I really like these characters and their dynamics. Like Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, they definitely feel like a team, but also friends, and they have banter back and forth that I like. They all feel like they have their different roles in the team, and they fill them well. Eggman and Eggman's grandfather, there's some funny moments with them, but especially with him and Agent Stone, his his assistant from the other movies, where this guy is just he's kind of like a decent dude, and he's like earnest, and for whatever reason he's really devoted to Eggman, and it doesn't make sense, but it's like it's really funny, and there's like a arc with it too in this movie that I actually enjoyed a lot. Like the jokes are hit or miss, right? There's some really good jokes where I'm like, wow, that's funny, and I like couldn't help but laugh. And there's times where it's like, okay, you're trying too hard to appeal to kids. Where you know, there's a point where Eggman pops up and he's like, Eggman has entered the chat or something like that, and I was like, bro, like you feel like you're trying to be like kind of cool and relate to like a younger audience, and it's like it's not. It's like when Eggman was doing like Fortnite dances and stuff like that in the second movie, where it's like, stop, this feels forced. There's moments like that, but for the most part, I enjoyed those characters, and I thought the movie actually was pretty funny. Shadow the Hedgehog, Keanu Reeves gives a good performance, I think, with this character, and I think he's easily one of the best parts of the movie when it comes to the fighting and when it comes to his actual character. He's a revenge focused character, which you've seen in a bunch of things. I'm sure if you've seen enough media, you've seen revenge plots and things like that. But with his character, they establish pretty much right off the bat that there's something more to his character, and he's only really beating the shit out of Sonic and them because they're in his way, or the soldiers because they're in his way, right? Like you can tell that there's definitely more to this character, and more will be revealed when we get the backstory and things like that, and that made him a lot more interesting. And man, when it comes to the fight scenes, I mean, he really did feel invincible. Where it's like, damn, like you make the main character feel like he's nothing. Like, really, it's just, it's kind of hard to watch. Like, I think I said that about Knuckles with that last movie. This more so. It's like, what are you going to do to this guy? I don't know. And then when it finally got to the end, the ending, the third act and the big battle, it's kind of like the second movie, but even more so. Like this felt epic. It felt hype. Uh, it was really cool and fun to watch. Um, I just I enjoyed the ending a lot, other than one aspect that we'll get to in a second. But it was really cool. That being said, negatives. Where do I start with this? So first off, made sure to put emphasis on like the main cast being good here because the other characters around them, like it feels like they're in like a kids show or something, like where they feel unnatural and like it's forcing them to be kind of hokey and weird. Like what's it called? Kristen Ritter from Jessica Jones. She plays Director Rockwell in this. She feels kind of off with their delivery and things like that because of the nature and the tone of the movie she's in. It's just like the other characters around them just it feels odd. They feel awkward. And added on to that, um, these three characters, not even just these three, but also Shadow. They don't look real most of the time. And on top of that, these humans, the human characters, these actors, they have to act off of them, and or it just doesn't work. Like even with James Marsden, who's kind of an important character to Sonic, even he, like when he talks to Sonic, and it can be a really touching moment, it takes me out of it because I'm like, I don't believe James Marsden is actually talking to anything right now. I really don't. It just feels inauthentic to me and forced. And and that goes for more than just James Marsden. It just, it feels off. And even if you're just looking at them by themselves, there's points where they look good, and then there's points where it's like, ooh, this feels unfinished, right? Their fur doesn't look right. It's just, it's kind of all over the place. Where we start off with Shadow beating that ass, and then we, start learning more about Shadow, things like that, and then it turns into this like heist plot. Like they even talk about like, hey, couldn't Tom Cruise do this? It's like this really overcomplicated, really but still silly heist that doesn't feel like it really fits in this movie, and it's just happening. It's just something for the characters to do for a little bit, and especially it gives the human characters something to do. I was thinking this from the beginning. I was like, okay, with the first movie, you needed James Marsden because you need somebody for Sonic to play off of. Tails ain't here yet. Knuckles ain't here yet. But then, ever since that movie, because they made that character and his wife, Tika Sumpter's character, so important to Sonic, you need to keep them around. It wouldn't make sense for them to just disappear. So they're still here. So we got to give them something to do. And so in the second movie, you had that part with the wedding and all that, which was easily the worst part of that movie. Felt completely unnecessary. And here we got this heist, and it's like, okay, we can give James Marsden and Tika Sumpter's character something to do. So they're involved in that. And it's just like it comes down to like sassy black woman is helping them out. I won't spoil that part completely, but it just kind of felt off and forced to me. And it's like, oh, you can't do this thing, but then, oh, okay, we're gonna do this thing, and it's real silly. Like I did like the stuff with Eggman and his grandpa during that. Like I thought that part was fun, but the rest of it, I was like, okay, this doesn't feel like it fits. It doesn't really work. The backstory with Shadow, right? It's really it just wasn't enough. Like it needed to be fleshed out a little bit more, and it needed to feel more natural and less kind of cheesy because it's real cheesy. I mean, it does feel a little bit like forced to be kind of touching and things like that. I'm trying not to spoil stuff, but there's also the whole thing with Eggman's grandpa, which doesn't make sense, and they don't even bother to explain it. But then once you see the flashback, it's like, okay, now this really doesn't make sense. Once you see the full flashback, it's like, okay, we'll just make a joke about it and kind of move on. It's like, okay. But the really big thing is like, as a result of that flashback, what they decide to do, like what they plan on doing at the end of the movie in the third act, that makes no sense. I was like, why would you go that far? Like, based on what I saw, it is not worth all this. What you originally said you were going to do, okay, that makes sense. But going this far, going this big, It doesn't make sense that you would do all this. It just doesn't. That's pretty much it. I had problems with the story, and I don't think it fully reached its potential. And some of the jokes were just were really like roll your eyes and kind of cringe. But there's enough good stuff here, right? There's references to the games, like with certain things that Shadow does. Like he'll stop. There's a point where he like stops and he does like this pose. I was like, okay, I remember that from the games, and he rides a motorcycle, shooting a gun, and things like that. So there's things for the fans of the games and things like that. The action was all really fun and cool to watch. It does have enough there, and the characters and their dynamics I think works really well. So there's enough there to still make me be like, you know what? Even with the numerous problems I have with the plot and the writing, and that it's just kind of all over the place and doesn't make sense, it still ends up being fine. It's not quite the good because of those issues I had, but it's still fine. I think it mostly is worth watching. But yeah, I'm giving this a good enough. I didn't even give it its rating. I'm giving it good enough. And yeah, that's Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Subscribe, and we're done.